What's up, everybody? DH Thorne here, for those of you who don't know, but I'm pretty sure if you're here this early, you do know. So hello and welcome. Hello and welcome. We've got a few people already in the chat talking away. We got the illustrious Wyatt Coverdale. We got Joffrey. We've got Sin. We've got Prince of Gilgal, or Gygel. Not sure how they prefer to say it. Gilgel? I don't know. Hector Lich and Skeleton Power, as well as the beautiful, wonderful Blue Wrench, Nina the Mystic. Saying greetings, everyone. So hello, everybody. This is a typical Thursday night stream. We're going to be talking about a lot of random stuff. We're going to, obviously, current events are on the table, but this is a spiritual spiritual stream as usual. So everything's on the table. Whatever kind of questions you might have or topics you might want me to discuss over the next basically give or take 2 hours. So welcome, Damien. Haven't seen you in a little bit. Good to see you as well. Appreciate you, brother. One of the things I want to get off right out of the starting gate tonight is I have sort of figured out my problem. I've sort of burnt out on doing a lot of community stuff. I've kind of burned out on teaching classes and, doing all of that stuff. So instead of, conducting the weekly or bi-weekly classes like I was doing, or even doing mentorships, I've decided to completely isolate myself from the general public for a little while so I can focus on just getting my creative juices flowing going again. Of course, doing the live streams is fine. Maybe doing a little bit more video work would be nice. I'd like to start getting back into weekly videos. But that being said, that means since the class is no longer active, what I've done instead is all of the class videos that I've recorded since I started doing them last year are now available for my patrons at the $9 level or higher. So if you're basically the second tier or higher, you can watch somewhere along the lines of about 70 plus, maybe more, hours of instructional video, mostly to do with a wide assortment of things. Really, we talk about some really cool stuff. One of my favorite classes was the one where we talked about psi balls, chi balls, energy balls, and learning to sense them and feel them as you're generating them. Some people had really big breakthroughs with that class, and you could tell it was really wild. As well as chakra meditations, elemental meditations, and many other things. The last one that I did may be one of my most interesting. It is a form of divination practice that sort of helps you with prescience. And I've been using it a lot lately, and it's been working pretty good. So something that will be definitely interesting to people. This, of course, is, I wouldn't say necessarily premium content, but it's definitely behind paywall content for now. So if you're interested in that, go to my Patreon. You can find the link in the description. When you click on that, it'll take you to the Patreon link. Well, it'll take you to a Linktree link where all my other links are. You go to the Patreon link, and then you can find the tiers. The second tier, the $9 tier, is the one that makes that available. And if you, for whatever reason, if you sign up for that and you don't get the link somehow, you can't find it, just message me on there and I will get back to you with the link as soon as possible. So there's lots of content there, and it's not just me having my usual, rambling stuff. Well, I do ramble a bit, but it's not my usual, having a good time Thursday night stuff. It's way more formal, way more instructional, participatory. We do meditation, all kinds of cool stuff. So, but that helps me because now I don't necessarily have to constantly be, engaged. And one of the things that was happening was, I guess, maybe because the schedules got erratic, or maybe because people just kind of got bored of it, or I don't know what, maybe because I got bored of it. It's really, let's be honest. There was lower and lower attendance until it came down to just one person. And I'm like, well, that's not really a classroom at that point. They're basically getting a one-on-one lecture for free, not for free, but for $20. And it made me realize I'm not really interested in doing quite so much of that structured stuff lately. I kind of want to just, get back into it my own way. So that's something to realize, something to look out for if you're interested in that. No pressure, just an option. So let's see who showed up since then. Let's see why it says, I always will wait 6 months after something crazy happens just to see if it really is safe or not. Liberation of Twitter could be a trap. You never know. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't want to deny that there is that possibility, although I would recommend that if you go through life second guessing everything, it's not really healthy. Of course, with experience comes wisdom. You can sort of tell, way things are. Of course, there is the very remote possibility that Elon is working for the non-freedom side and is trying to lull people into trusting Twitter and then trusting his brain chip, and then he's going to control us all. Look, I know people that think that way. Some people think that there is no good guys, that everything is, it's the equivalent in some ways of the flat earth people who they look at all of the political intrigue going on and they think that the whole thing's just all of it, that there's no good guys. Everybody is trying to screw us into the same outcome. And while that is a valid perspective and it may be true, I don't think so. I think that in some ways, that's borderline superstition. As much as I'm into conspiracy theories, I know that sounds kind of hypocritical to people on the outside, but I've been watching this stuff for a long time. And while I can say that there's a lot of people that are not good guys that claim to be, look, you gotta put your energy towards something. You gotta lean into some solution. And if you don't, you might as well find something else. You might as well just, it's worse than giving up at that point. It's like, resignation. Don't even bother getting in the ring anymore. Just quit. So, let's see. Hector Lich says, definitely would be cool if you recorded a video on folklore or haunted locations. That's more my wife's bag. Like, I'm not really into that stuff. I don't study it as much. With the exception of the ones that are in my immediate area, like Janes Hill, Mount Misery. If you don't know those places, those are places where I kind of cut my spiritual teeth, if you will. A lot of crazy stuff happened in those locations. You also have Kings Park Asylum, which is also nearby. And I'm hoping that if, people ever come in this area, I'm going to do, some tours with them. Like if we ever get any kind of a meeting going, that'd be pretty cool. Anybody who ends up on Long Island that isn't like a psycho, some kind of a public meetup would be cool in one of these places. That would be kind of fun. So, yeah, that'd be pretty neat. Yeah. So, of course, it's really important that I sort of take this sort of, time away from doing the public, not even public, the structured classes and all of that. And, I suppose one way to look at it is once upon a time, I really thought that I was supposed to be a teacher. And I'm realizing that maybe I'm not supposed to be a teacher. Maybe I'm just supposed to be like a scout or, almost like a psychologist, like my job is not to create a course of study and then follow through with that. I'm not an educator in that way. I'm a storyteller. I'm an entertainer. I entertain you with my experiences, with the things that I have discovered and all of that. But the idea that I am going to sit around and create lesson plans and really instruct people, line by line, subject by subject, it's not really my thing. I suppose if I had like I don't know what you would call it, like an apprentice, whatever, like someone who was living with me that was both inspiring me to want to teach them and learning, and I could do things with one-on-one or one-on-two or whatever, some small group, that would be different. But the virtual world, it works well for the conversation, but it's very difficult to really get the gist of the energy. If you were here and you were sitting on one of my rituals or something, whatever you think you feel watching them doesn't compare, obviously, to being here. And sometimes I really feel alone, which is fine, but sometimes I really feel it would be cool to have somebody else here. So, maybe someday when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I guess it works the other way for that too. Although most people misunderstand that axiom actually means something a little different than what people mostly think it means. All right, some comments popped up. Let's see. I'll look at those and then I'll start talking about the theme of tonight. And we'll get that over with. Let's see. So why it says, well, he's clarifying, well, I never said that Elon was a bad guy. I'm still on the side that says he's with us. My concern is that this whole takeover could go tits up really quickly. Yes, I think it's possible. It's just Musk doesn't have, when it comes to professional stuff, when it comes to financial moves like this, I don't think, I think he takes risks, but I think that he likes to line up the chessboard before he says you're in check, if that makes sense. I don't think he telegraphed too much. Like he did, like I think everybody noticed it was coming, but he didn't telegraph so far in advance that they could really prepare a good defense against it. Their only defense was to try to get him on the board so that he couldn't get the shares, get the number of shares he would need, because if you're on the board, it would be like 2 years before he'd be allowed to do anything. So they were trying to snooker him with that. They underestimated him, and then so I don't know. It's 6 months till it's official. It's a long time. Anything could happen. But when you see the relationship that he's sort of having going on with him and Jack Dorsey, I gotta say it's rather fascinating. It makes one wonder, is this like Jack Dorsey's redemption arc? And I have mixed feelings about that. I feel like Jack Dorsey, I'm not an expert on the guy, but the little bit I've experienced of him online tells me that, he allowed a lot of crap to happen on his platform. And whether it was really his idea or something he just sort of passively allowed, or maybe they put him in a position so he had to allow it. But I do get the impression that he regrets some of it, if not all of it. And I don't know whether he's trying to get on the right side of history before it's too late so that he can cover himself, or if he genuinely feels like he's got a right or wrong that he allowed to happen. My compassionate side wants to believe the latter. I look in his face and I see genuine pain. I don't see a person there who is faking pain. I see a person who's genuinely in pain. And I do believe that there's some regret, some major regret. I don't think that's fake, but time will tell. Time will tell what he's actually for. Let's see. Who would I rather meet, Anton LaVey or Madame Blavatsky? I guess between the two, the one I would disagree with the most would probably be Madame Blavatsky. I think her interpretations of things, she turned into cultish, like superstitious kind of misinterpretations. There's a whole bunch of ascended masters living under mountains type of shit. I don't know. I give her credit amongst other Theosophy Society people for ushering in the mentality of the New Age that benefits us, whether I agree with it all or not. But I don't think I would necessarily like it. I think I'd rather meet Anton LaVey if I had to choose. And I've heard some really dark things about him that were hidden, like he would beat animals and stuff. I'm not okay with that stuff. I don't know if it's true, but those are the rumors. I think his daughter said as much. But I think his ability to repurpose certain philosophies, it definitely resonates with my own. And I think that, just his sense of style was fun, even though it was sort of, for the time, it was very campy Satan stuff. I don't know. I think he would be more fun. Now, I've seen his, who was it? His children have gone off into different directions and they have different ways of looking at things. So I don't know how I feel about some of that, but, honestly, neither one do I idolize. Like, I wouldn't idolize either one of them. I think that they're both just interesting. I wouldn't idolize either one. If I had a choice of somebody to meet that's not alive, but would be relatively recent, it would be like, Alan Watts. I'd want to meet him. I'd want to meet Terence McKenna. Those are the people I'd want to meet. I probably also wouldn't mind meeting Carlos Castaneda or whoever he really is. That would be entertaining too. So, yeah. Thank you, Wyatt. That's right. Be my cheerleader. Get them up. Get those numbers up. Get them numbers up. 27 watching. That should be at least 30 likes. Come on, guys. Come on. You know, I don't get the views I used to get because I'm not pursuing it actively. I'm not advertising. I'm not going out of my way anymore. I'm sort of, like I said, I'm burnt out a little bit on some of this stuff. Kind of because there's other things I'm focusing so much time and energy on. And, you know, I think at some point that has to change. I can't continue to ignore my baby. I can't continue to ignore this project. The attachments that are, you know, causing me stress about the world. Those things have to subside. And I think it will once I see that, you know, right now it's kind of like it's kind of like the person driving the car is having a coronary and we could go flying off the road at any moment. So I'm trying to help. I'm trying to grab the wheel and help grab the wheel. I'm trying to encourage the right course of action. I'm doing magic. I'm doing social stuff. I'm being a downright troll on Twitter. Like, if you want to have some entertaining trolling, like, I'm a nasty fucker, like on Twitter. I'm bragging about that. I probably shouldn't, because somebody's going to be like, oh my God. But I can be a pretty nasty troll. It's like, I will mercilessly try to make certain people angry. I don't start shit, but once it starts, I'm merciless about it. This is why I don't like to argue, by the way. This is one of the reasons I don't like to argue, because I'm not nice. You know, I'm actually very likely to be aggressive, and be unfair. So, you know, yeah. Wyatt is, I'm not sure if I should even call that comment out. But you know, them hormones and stuff, you know, haha. Scott Cunningham. Do I know who that is? I don't think I do. Who is that? I feel like I'm going to get like a big giant, like red flag for not knowing that. I don't know. What's up, Atropa? Good to see you. And Jockster, what's up? Kelly Meadows, what's up, Kelly? Yeah. So, all right, let's get on with the topic a little bit. So, as you guys might have seen, I have for comedic purposes, I have Baghdad Bob. And I don't know how many of you guys recognize Baghdad Bob. The reason I have Baghdad Bob up there is because watching the shit show that's going on right now with specifically our government, it is a little bit like watching the fall of Iraq, when Baghdad Bob was standing up there and doing his best to try to make it look like Saddam Hussein was still in control, and to make it look like they had a chance of winning, to make it look like all kinds of stuff. And when I turn on the TV, which I do as rarely as possible, or I happen to see clips from the media, it's like watching Baghdad Bob. You know, you have that one asshole, I don't remember his name, the one who said that Elon Musk wasn't very bright, you know, trying to say that the left wants to give free healthcare and child stuff, and the right wants to have, what was it, fascism or whatever. It's like, you know, there's definitely constructive and destructive criticisms that you can level against, you know, the people that I support currently, and I don't ever want people to think that I'm some kind of a cult follower, but I also understand the nature of informational war, psychology, and culture war. And we are at a stage in this situation where the lines are drawn. You can't really, if you're neutral, you're useless. You're not in the game. You kind of are going to have to throw yourself behind something, and start adding your energy to it, or just completely stay out, you know, to the degree where it's like, you know, almost absurd. You know, you have to put your head in the sand. And to me, it's rather silly to see such heavy-handed and obvious, not just like bad propaganda. Like, good propaganda is believable, but this is bad propaganda. It's not even remotely believable. It's it's so absurdly off, and it's so absurdly biased and irrational that it really does kind of makes me uncomfortable. Like, I have like a genuine reaction to false information. That doesn't mean that I catch all disinformation, but I mean, I'm genuinely like allergic to propaganda. Like, when I see it, even when I agree with it, it bothers me. And it really bothers me when I know it's an outright lie. It's one thing if it's like incorrect. Like, you can tell the difference between somebody who's just maybe getting it wrong and someone who's willfully misrepresenting the truth. And I see our side doing that too. When I say our side, I mean the people who would be free. I'm not saying like Republicans. I'm not saying Trump people. I'm saying the people who don't want to go into this crazy authoritarian globalist nonsense that they're trying to pull and failing very badly. The Great Reset is not doing well. I'm from a spiritual level, I don't have any inside information materially, but from a spiritual level, it's not going according to plan. It is fucking up bad, and they're really, they're desperate to try to consolidate everything and hold on to what they can, and that's going to be Europe, it's going to be Australia, it's going to be Canada, not going to be America, most likely. It's still anybody's game, but yeah, you know, I can't be sure. I don't think they're going to win it. I think that they're going to win some things. So at the end of the day, the level of intentional, you know, deception and propaganda that is unethical is off the charts on the other side, the side that wants to enslave us. It's off the charts. It's not even in the realm of like, I look at this and go, who believes this shit? Then I realize, well, they're not trying to convince new people. They're actually desperately trying to cling to the ones that they have and wind them up and get them violent. And that's a key thing to realize. They're desperately trying to create violence right now. Now, I want to make it clear that doesn't mean that I don't see anything on the opposition to that doesn't worry me. One of the things that the opposition has had to do to counter globalism is to increase the sense of identity of the people that are resisting it, which means nationalism, which I'm not opposed to. I think nationalism can be healthy. It depends on how it's, you know, depends on how it's done. If it's nationalism to the point where everyone else is like a target, no, that's not cool. If it's nationalism to the point where, like, I care about my family more than I care about yours, then yes, that's fine. I think that that's normal. You know, it's not to the point where I prey upon you, but where if there's a fire, I'm going to drag my wife, kid, and pets out first before yours. That's the kind of nationalism I support. I don't support the kind of nationalism that says we're going to tread on everybody and bomb them and steal from them. I'm not okay with that. But the other thing that the opposition, which, like I said, that's fair. But the other thing that they're really pulling on is the spiritual stuff. And there's a revival of sort of hard conservative fundamentalism going on that's starting. And that doesn't make me happy. You know, they're getting a little too comfortable bringing back satanic panic type rhetoric to counter the globalists, saying that they're all demonic and they worship Moloch and all. And maybe they do. Maybe there is some of that. I can tell you with some authority that at least some of them practice sort of forgotten, you know, mystery school stuff, Phoenician, Babylonian, stuff like that. It's definitely in there. And there's definitely secret societies going on. And it's not just people that are corrupt. There's definitely some hidden shit going on that's definitely, you know, going to look like this to the outsider. And maybe on some levels it is. Is it literal Satanism? No. Although I've heard from some people that Anton LaVey was actually sort of fingered by the FBI to create some subversive stuff, you know, and they supported him. I've heard that rumor. I don't know if it's true. I'm just telling you what I've heard. So some of the things that we practice and believe may have been influenced by that, and I wouldn't doubt it. It sounds reasonable to me, because what the globalists need to do to win is they have to destroy our connection to our heritage and the foundations of our society. Now, whether you like Christianity or not, or Judeo-Christian values or not, you have to admit that American society was based upon them. I don't necessarily mean that our Constitution and government, but I mean our society was based upon those basic, fundamental, moralistic, spiritual things. You have to admit it. If you can't admit that, then I think you've got a rod in your eye. I think you're blinding yourself with hate. You have to realize how things are in order to make any changes. So what the globalists did, what communists do, what any group that's trying to take over a system does, that really wants to get to you, they want to destroy your sense of identity in your culture. And attacking religions, one of the things that you do. Look at your history. Haven't you noticed that whenever a conquering invader would come into a land, the norm was to replace their gods or demote their gods or somehow, repurpose their gods to make them fit your own political needs? And this is one of the things that Rome did very smartly, because instead of going in and saying you can't worship your gods anymore, all they said was add Caesar to your pantheon. That's it. You can keep your religion, just add Rome. And this was brilliant, because this was a much more peaceful way to take over and assimilate societies rather than just conquer them. Well, the globalists, whatever you think they are, they don't do that. What they did was, they tried to basically destroy your connection to whatever fundamental principles, whether it was Christianity or whatever it was, the founding fathers, and all of those things are being attacked. All of those things are being attacked, and in a way that's obvious. It's not just that, oh, we disagree with this part. We want to, sort of argue against it. No, it must be silenced. We must take down the founding fathers. We must take down our history because of this, that, and the other thing. Now, Slim Lewis, I'm gonna argue with you here a little bit. You said American society was not built on moralism. LOL. Slavery, women with no right to vote, no workers' rights. You're committing the gravest sin imaginable to someone who studies history. And that is, you are looking at the past through the lens of current ideals and values. Unless you're just trolling, which is fine. But if that's your honest opinion, you're not looking through a lens that's actually clear. You're looking through rose-colored glasses about your own current civilization. Those ideals that you're describing were not the norm yet. They weren't at all the norm. Those things were starting to become different. So slavery, for example, most of the founding fathers, although not all of them obviously did much about it, a lot of them had stuff to say about that the intention was to eventually end it. It wasn't perfect, but it was there. Like, the seeds for it were there. You can tell if you look at the history. Women with no rights to vote. Well, you might not realize this, but not everybody had the right to vote. When America was first founded, it was only landowners, male landowners, were the only ones who were allowed to vote. Do you know why? The reasoning was very simple. They believed that people who voted should have a stake in the country. It wasn't meant to be a general democracy where everybody had a vote. It was meant to be the landowners, because they had a stake in the system. They were the ones who had the vote. And the assumption was that everybody that lived on their, farm or whatever, most people owned land, but those who didn't had influence over the owners very strongly, because those owners had to take care of the people working for them. So it was a much more symbiotic system. So the idea that everybody had to vote wasn't part of the original founding of America. It was a representative form of government, not a true democracy. It uses democratic process, it uses democratic systems, but it is not a democracy, which means there was no actual need to give everybody the right to vote, whether they were male, female, or otherwise. Look up your history. So you can't, again, you're looking through the lens of what we think of as right and wrong today. Wrong. No workers' rights. Well, again, the system that we have today we've centralized a lot of things. But at the time, everybody knew everybody. You know, so if you had a boss that was abusing you, well, you'd just like, you know, call them out in public and people would shun them. If your boss was really abusing you, there was other measures that you could take. But let's say that didn't work. You could leave. You have to understand something. The founding fathers, their job was not, their idea was not with the intention of fixing all the world's problems. That's what you're expecting when you say what you just said. Their function, what they did, was to create a system of government that was decentralized, that wasn't going to interfere with the everyday life of the individual beyond simply protecting their human rights and establishing a country which could do that. Gradually over time, we have shifted the role of government into the welfare of people instead of just protecting their rights. So from that perspective, you're completely wrong. I'm telling you honestly, our culture was founded on a form of moralism that was very moral for its time. And over time, the standards of that moralism have changed. Let's see. You know, and if people don't like America, I'm sorry, that's great. You know, I think that's great that you have the right to do that. Try doing that in many other countries. You wouldn't get that option. Is it perfect? No system of government will ever be perfect, because government is an abomination to human nature. The human beings evolved under tribalistic systems which were decentralized in nature. You know, you had tribes of a couple hundred people was like the healthy size, between 200 and 500, I suppose. The idea that we're supposed to have these big centralized governments running everything is anathema to the human nature. So there's no form of government that's going to satisfy you. It's never going to happen. Well, anyway, rather than going back and forth about whether America's good or bad, are there better options? Of course. I'm just talking about the intention of what the globalists do, what various different systems do to subvert that which is working. It is undeniable that, for all its flaws, you could argue because they made a few good decisions around World War II, and because all of our industry was intact after World War II, and we had the only economy that was up and running without anything in the way, that's why we took over the world, basically. But for whatever reason, here we are. And I'm not interested in taking over the world. That's not what I want. I want our country to return to focusing on its people. First and foremost, that counts for everybody. Black, white, brown, gay, straight, doesn't matter. Everybody who's here, that is an American, that is part of our, not just borders, but the basic principles, then that's what we need to focus on. And once upon a time, America stood for things that we all mostly agreed on. Now, we weren't all satisfied, but the general rank and file of American people agreed upon the basic principles. Whether they were perfect or not, there was an agreement on what that meant. We could disagree about what to do with the surplus resources of taxes. There was a disagreement on whether, we should have the right to abort or the right to not do it or whatever. But the general consensus was this was what? It was the land of the free, the home of the brave. We had certain standards, we had certain beliefs, and we sort of had a common identity. And that has been taken from us because of the gradual shift, the subversive shift. You look up, what's his name? Was it Yuri Bezmenov or something like that? Political theory or whatever it was. And he talks about the subversive efforts. There's no question that happened. It's obvious. It's not even, sure, a fact checker would say it didn't happen because there's no record of it, but it obviously happened. There's no other thing that it could have been. When we see the people that have been in control of everything all this time and are still in control, yeah, it's pretty obvious. So, but, that's just, one version of the apocalypse is that stuff. What I really wanted to get to is not see, people have this misunderstanding of the apocalypse. What's up, Asariel? I love the apocalypse, an entire country being bombed and annihilated with just one country between mine and the nuclear threat lingering in the air right now. But I can still live like all is well. Weird. Yeah. Yep. Some of that I will tell you, though nobody will know for sure. I'm sure it could change at any moment. But the general gist, this is a lot of brinksmanship, because this is not about what it looks like on the surface. The conflict in Ukraine is not about a lot of the things the media wants you to think it's about. I'm not saying it's not about any of those things. It's just we see a lot of things that they want us to know about it because they want us to have a very framed perspective. You have to, this is to everybody, not simply Asariel. There's framing, okay? There's informational framing. When you're trying to, like, if you're a good salesman, you know how to frame things so that people will agree with you about it. You steer conversations away from topics that you know will maybe make them not want to buy it. Or you'll steer them intentionally into them with an answer. So use Hegelian dialectic. You'll give them sort of a crisis, and they'll have like, oh, well, I don't know about that. Then you offer a solution that the only thing that would work is your product. So framing the narrative is key. And the media has very successfully framed the narrative for low information individuals who believe that this is all about Putin being a dickbag that just wants to take over a country. And that is such a two-dimensional, it's just like when Bush said WMDs in Iraq, and just like when they said that they were going to Iraq to liberate people and spread democracy, and all they really wanted to do was install a puppet dictator. It's all the same shit. It's the same kind of shit. They frame these things in such a way that low informational people make snap decisions and support ideologies and courses of action that probably don't have their best interests at heart. And the hidden part of this situation is the reason why all the usual suspects are so suddenly giving a shit about Ukraine is not because they care about Ukraine. People need to get it out of their head that these politicians care about them. That probably goes for everyone that's in politics. I would argue even the ones that I like, a lot of them. Politicians don't care about you. The media doesn't care about you. They don't care about Ukraine. They don't care about the people there. This is about power. This is about the money laundering that, many people in the West have done in Ukraine. Ukraine is one of the dirtiest countries in the world when it comes to corruption. This is not debatable. It's all recorded. And it's a shame that innocent people are caught in the middle. This is why when it kept happening, I'm like, instead of waving a Ukrainian flag and giving a shit about a country, why don't you try to find a way to help the people that are in distress? Helping that country doesn't help the people. It's a little bit like in Africa, when people get very upset about the starving people in Africa, and they'll send all this money and all these resources to help those people. And you know what ends up happening? The warlords of the regions take those charitable donations for themselves and then dole them out in a way that makes them more powerful. So your care for them makes it worse. Believe it or not. It's not your fault. But it's the old saying, muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone, or kindly let me help you or you will drown, said the monkey to the fish as it carried him safely up a tree. It's this idea that we think we know what's best. And because we care, we legitimately care, and we try to do things to make things better, but in a way we're not. We're actually just trying to assuage our own feelings of guilt and sadness. It's actually more about us. Like when you see everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people who are waving the flags for the current thing, be it Ukraine or, what happened in the Supreme Court potentially recently, all of these things, people are, they're reacting because they feel bad, but not because it's actual compassion for the situation. They're being told to be mad, but they don't know why. They're being given reasons to be mad and to take up arms. You've got idiots on Reddit going there and getting killed because the reason that they're being enticed to go there is so there can be an international incident. Do you understand? Like the whole reason that was not just allowed, but kind of supported was so these doofuses could go over there, most of them with no combat training or experience beyond airsoft. They go over there and they get bombed. And now there's a big international incident. And what does that do? That just incenses more people to be mad. And of course, they'll say the Russians did it. But then, like, evidence will show the missile came from the other side. Maybe. We don't know. The regimes that have been in control for the last 3 generations or so, longer than that, really, but I mean total control. You know, up until maybe the 60s, they didn't have total control. They had major control, not total control. They've had just about total control, at least of the US, for the last 3 generations, I would guess. And they're losing that control. And that's why you see a lot of crazy shit going on. And I'm not saying Russia or Putin are the good guys. I don't mean to say that, because that's the other side of propaganda. You have the Russian propaganda that's trying to make you favor them. I think that there's a lot of entities that are resisting globalism because they've got their own ideas. Maybe they want a bigger seat at the globalist table. You know, just because they're resisting globalism doesn't mean that they have a problem with globalism. They just might have a problem with their seat at the table. Maybe if globalists had reached out to Musk and said, hey, we'll get you to Mars, but you've got to do what we want, maybe he would be on the other side right now. Maybe he would be supporting them instead of calling them out and literally exposing them with Twitter posts pointing at Soros and you know, Clinton and Obama and all these people saying, why are their funding groups the ones that are attacking me? So the problem is we don't know. I don't know. I can only go by what I see and what my spiritual sources tell me. I'm probably wrong about a lot of it. But what I can tell you is the fog of war is so thick that, ironically, facts won't help you because there are none. You have to go by intuition. You have to go by pattern recognition. You have to have the mind of an analysis, you know, mind of an analyst. You have to be able to look at things indirectly. You need indirect wisdom. You need prescience of a sort to understand remotely what's going on, to even get close. And it's still anybody's game, but it's not going well for the other side, the bad guys. The thing is that we're still conditioned to see things from different boxes of perspective. Now, for me, it's useful to label myself under certain philosophies, to say I'm a non-dualist, to say I'm a libertarian. All of that's fair. The problem is that those things become tribal identities after a little while. And you will, instead of saying, well, I'm basing what I think on an agreement with this philosophy, it now becomes libertarians do this, libertarians don't do that. Becomes a tribal mentality. Other people who are libertarians must think this way too. And this is how they get us in trouble. This is how the people who wash our brains manipulate us, is because they have twisted this into such a thing, and they use such blatant doublespeak that only works on people that are really kind of too far gone, the zombies that are never going to get it. As that goes on, we are conditioned to be tribal about it. And here's the thing, at some point you're going to have to be. At some point, this is what I was saying before, at some point you're going to have to just kind of hold your nose and support the side that's going the direction closer to what you want. The thing is, if you're siding with establishment globalists, who generally cater mostly to the left, by the way, but not entirely, you're advocating for authoritarian globalism. And that's not what I'm advocating for. So at the end of the day, we're all being divided, but human nature has a trick up its sleeve. Nature finds a way, as they say. The more divided we become, the more desperate we look for leadership, the more desperate we become for a beacon of hope that will unite us. And this is why, to give props to my Trump boy and to now Elon, this is when charismatic people step up and become George Washingtons and become, yes, Hitler types, whatever. This is what happens. Because people need someone that they can all look to, like imagine it's a foggy night and you're in a boat and you don't know if there's rocks ahead. You need that lighthouse. You need that beacon. And we're in a fog. We don't know. But we see one person standing up and getting all of the attention. That's troubling. It's very troubling, because although I don't consider myself part of like a Trump cult or something, they do exist. There are people who think that way. So, on the one hand, as I said before, that friends or those friends who think that there are no good guys, they've got a point. None of us should be seeing this as, I need to belong to a party to fix this. You've got to start thinking more in terms of which ones are trying to set me free and which ones are trying to take away my freedom. And when you figure out who those people are, then you've got a chance. So long as you're being led along by your flags, your identities, you're screwed. It's one of the things that I feel the worst about for my LGBT friends, because for so long they have been sort of put into this position that people have reached out to them to help them, and using this identity issue have led them into a path that they may regret. It's sort of like if someone said, you are a left-hand path occultist, and so therefore everyone in the world wants to kill you except this one group. This one group says we want to protect you, and we want to help you, and we want to set you free. All you got to do is give up this one thing. You know, give up your left hand, something. I know it sounds outrageous, but from a psychological perspective, that's literally what's going on. From a psychological perspective, the powers that be talk people in these marginalized groups. This is why they always go after them. This is why they always want the outcasts in society on their side, because they're easy to get. You reach out to minorities, you reach out to, I mean, why do you think once upon a time the old school commie people would say they reach out to sexual deviants? That meant homosexuals and shit. It would say that the commies were the party, the people who supported deviants. And so, of course, the other side is going to say, well, that's racist, that's bigoted, because not all deviants are bad, right? People who are just gay or something, that's, come on, it's the current year. Like, that stuff isn't that. It's, I mean, I have a line there is a line, like, leave them kids alone, like pedo's not okay, shit like that. But we all know that it's a normal part of human behavior now. Like, that's not you're not a deviant. That's actually quite normal. As it's become normalized, those people are realizing that they're more accepted, and not just in those very limited circles. and there is hope, but this is just an example of what I'm talking about. These people are, it's not like everyone's going to agree with this. There's going to be people who are going to be like offended by this. I say it with love. I'm not saying it with any hate or bigotry or judgment. I'm literally looking at it. That's my opinion, observing it. And this doesn't just, it's not just LGB. It's not just this or that. It's not just left-hand path. It's not just spirituality. It's all of it. It's a pretty good tactic, actually. I've used it. You know, I've said, like, I'm like trying to be the king of the island of misfit toys in a way. It's a valid tactic. You can do it in a way that is malevolent, or you can do it in a benevolent way. Crackbite says, hey there, I have a question. Google wasn't helpful, and I don't know where else to ask. Wasn't there a demon that likes to appear as a little boy, or do I remember it wrong? If I remember correctly, was it Red Dragon or, you know, Grimorian Verum? One of them has Lucifer as a little boy. So I don't remember which one it is. You may have to look. Yeah. It's right, a cereal, exactly. Leave them kids alone. Look, I mean, some things are just dangerous to talk about on YouTube. But, it is a good example of propaganda, though. The Florida bill that one side called the Don't Say Gay bill, and the other side called an anti-grooming bill. And if you read the language of the bill, it's an anti-grooming bill. Straightforward. But they got everybody twisted up. They got everybody twisted up. And it applies to everyone, not just LGB. If I couldn't go in and tell a kid from kindergarten to third grade about my sex life with my wife, that would also be bad. So it's really not what it's thought to be. And it's sad that it's even got to be like this. It's sad that we even have to try to argue about what these things are for and why they're important or not. The fact that a bunch of people, low information people, could decide that it meant something that it wasn't meant to be and then attack it. And then the other side sort of, because of that, it's like now they are conflated. And I never conflated the two together. I never conflated, you know, the LGBT stuff with groomering. I never equated that in a normal scenario. It's not like that. Do they exist? Yes, and there's a lot of straight groomers too. By the way, go look out there. Go look in the world, okay? You know, come on, the little white van, that's just LGBT people. No, there's straight groomers too, guys. That's the point, is that any groomers is bad. All of them are bad. So why are we all twisted up? Why is this a thing? Why are we fighting over this? This is pretty straightforward. Thank you, Dragon Rouge. Yes, Red Dragon. I thought it was Red Dragon. Thank you, Slim. And I'm sure the other ones are true too, because some people are saying, Grimorian Verum. I don't remember. It's been a while. I see it in my head, like a little plump little kid, you know, with curly hair. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to burp good in a minute. What troubles me is that we've gotten really twisted up so that a person with good, compassionate intentions like me will be labeled all kinds of ist kind of things. And that's like the furthest thing from my heart. I'm an ist towards pedos, okay? I'm an ist towards that. I'm a igot towards pedos, yes. You know, the things that I can't even say. Rouse says, a ton of people in the LGBT community have been abused a lot. I know it. I know it. Oh boy, do I know it. Luckily, not me, but I've had a lot of friends. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. I've had a lot of friends. So, I don't know. What I'm saying doesn't come from a place of judgment. It never has. I try to be compassionate towards people. I know it sounds weird for a left-hand path type guy, but I'm the kind of left-hand path that went so far that way that I became compassionate about it. I realize the divine in everybody. And that means I'm very compassionate about it. Doesn't mean I won't destroy bad people, hurtful people, rabid dogs, but it means that there will be compassion in the act. It won't be, well, I would hope anyway. I would hope. Well, anyway, the topic of apocalypse, though, by the way, doesn't mean explosions and death. Apocalypse means revelation, guys. That's why the final book in the Bible, the apocalyptic book, is called Revelations, because that's what the apocalypse means. Apocalypse means to reveal. It means to reveal the will of the divine. And every moment of every day is an apocalypse. It's a deeply metaphysical concept. It wasn't meant to just be politics. It's a deeply metaphysical concept. Every moment of every day is the apocalypse. It's always the revelation of the will of the divine, ongoing even now. Crackbite says, Grimorium Verum sounds much more familiar. It's a long time ago. Yes, agreed. And by the way, Crackbite, it's been good to see you, brother. It's good to see you again. Or whatever. Good to see you, Crackbite. Thank you, Slim. Slim says, Thorne, I label you as open-minded. I don't know if I would even say I'm open-minded. I feel like I'm firm on certain things for sure. There's certain things that I'm not open to debate. There's certain things I refuse to bend on. That doesn't mean, though, that I won't listen. Necessarily. But, you know, with discernment comes the ability to say, no, this isn't true. I'm not listening to you. I wouldn't say I'm open-minded. I would say I have discernment. I wish I could say I have an open mind. But I would say I'm more discerning than I am open. I'm open about certain things. I'm very sincere about what I'm open about, and I'm very sincere about what I'm not open about. I would say that above all, I try to be sincere. But beyond everything else, beyond being discerning, beyond being open, I want to be sincere. I don't like to lie, least of all to myself. You cannot be a functioning truth seeker, occultist, mystic, sorcerer, magician. You can't be any of those things if you're not honest with yourself to a fault. And a lot of people mistake criticism for honesty. They will start talking shit about themselves as if that's honesty. They'll say, oh, look how sincere and honest I am because I can talk shit about, I can criticize myself, blah, blah, blah. A lot of the times that criticism is actually just an egoistic sort of, you know, sometimes a cry for help. Sometimes it's a way to sort of like saying, oh, I'm terrible at this, like fishing for a compliment. I have a good friend who, you know, we just finished our mentorship. I don't know if he'll be back. You know, he's like, I think it's time. I'm like, yes, it's good. You know, I release you. And I left him with a final thought today. There was a sense of that he was not confident. There was a sense that he was insecure. There was a sense that he was frustrated. And I felt this urge, and I said to him, I'll read it to you. There's probably a better way to say it, but this is what came to me, and I wrote it down for him. And I said, meditate on this. Confidence is not the opposite of insecurity. Confidence is just another form of insecurity. Peace is the only way to transcend both. Music, of course, got interrupted by commercials. So let's read that again. Meditate on this. Confidence is not the opposite of insecurity. Confidence is just another form of insecurity. Peace is the only true way to transcend both. Wyatt, thank you. That might be the nicest thing you've ever said about me. Sushi asks, do entities... I don't know, my eyes aren't working on something. Do entities have to role play with what is going on in the world? Oh, do entities have a role to... Oh, there we go. Okay. I don't know why I'm having trouble reading this. What's going on with me? Do entities have a role to play with what is going on in the world, and how much can they influence the world we inhabit? Those higher ups worship certain entities because they give them knowledge? Whew. I've talked about the reality of what spirits are a bunch. So if anybody's heard this before, just go get a drink or something. The really difficult thing about discussing entities for me is that coming from a non-dual perspective, I don't see entities the way most people do. I don't see spirits the way most people do. In other words, my interpretation of them is going to be different. I'm not theistic and I'm not atheistic. I'm neither. I transcend both because of what I see things as. And someone who's theistic believes in personal beings that are called God or gods, meaning they are literally individual beings. The problem is, if you ever have a non-dual experience, if you ever actually experience non-duality, all forms of separation are shown to be illusory. That includes the forms of separation that identify you as an individual. If you are not an individual, in the truest sense, nothing else is either. That means whatever you are is not separate from everything else around it. It's not simply a reflection, it's literally the same thing, the same essence. The Brahman and the Atman are one and the same. There is one soul and there is one absolute. And there is no distinguishing between the two. All forms of duality are rooted in a sort of mirage. Duality, of course, is the functioning model, but that's all it is. It's like a hologram. So when I think about other spirits, I'm not thinking about them in a literal sense. So, for example, the idea that Lucifer is an angel that was cast out of heaven, that is a myth. But that myth is a symbol which points to an essence within the greater whole. There is that essence there. But Lucifer is not the only one that represents that essence. Prometheus does as well. One could argue that Loki does, Enki, Shiva, all of these entities to some degree represent that same fundamental essence of the light bringer, the Promethean entity that brings the light to ignorance. But that doesn't mean that those beings are real in the same way that theistic people want them to be. See, there's a deep secret that I talk about a lot, and it's very hard to articulate. It requires a lot of different understandings for it to really materialize in your understanding. I'm not saying that I have special knowledge. I'm just saying it's hard to explain. I can say it simply, But then people tend to overlook it. If you really examine who and what you actually are, if you really peel back all the layers and get to the source of what you are, when you remove everything that you are not actually, you find that all that's remaining is consciousness. And consciousness is clarity. It is not, it's sort of an indescribable clarity. I asked somebody today, if I asked you, if you went on a mission to see your eyes, what would you do? Let me ask you guys, everybody in the chat right now, if I said, how would you see your eyes? Like if I told you to look for your eyes, how would you see them? What would you do to find them? Give me in the chat a quick, like top of your head, how would you go look at your eyes? How would you do that? How would all of you look at your eyes? In the chat, give me that answer. How would you look at your eyes? Let's see if anybody gets it. I'll give you guys a minute. Okay. I'm gonna keep going. Just gonna let everybody just drop your answers. I see 3 already. Okay, I think that's enough people. So pretty much everybody, unless they were sort of trolling, said mirror, right? So all of you said mirror. Everybody who said mirror, you still don't get it. The easiest way to see your eye, you're looking through it right now. You're seeing your eye right now. You're looking through it. You don't need to look in a mirror. That lesson is the essence of non-dual revelation. We go looking externally for the truth. We're looking through it right now. The fact that you said mirror, realize that means you don't realize that you see through your eye, meaning you're looking at your eye right now. You're seeing your eye right now without a mirror. You're seeing through them. JM Hatter, yes. Through them. That's how you see your eye. Well, that's consciousness. If I said, find consciousness, where is it? If you go looking in your head, you're a fool. It's like looking in a mirror. Consciousness isn't in your head. Your head is in consciousness. The mirror is in your eye. You're never going to find the truth out there. There is no out there. You're never going to see your eye in a mirror better than you already see it. You see your eye better than anybody. No one can see your eye from the perspective that you see it right now. Nobody. Only you can see your eye the way you do. No one else in the world ever could. That's divinity. Divinity is that consciousness. Divinity is clarity. Divinity is invisible. Consciousness is invisible. It is formless. It is nameless. It appears as nothing. And when you go looking for it, you'll never find it because you're looking through it even now. Once you realize that, and you start to realize all of the things you see in your eyes, in your vision, cloud you from realizing you're seeing your eyes. So when you went looking in the mirror to find your eye, you were actually deluding yourself. Consciousness does the same thing. Consciousness does the exact same thing because it deludes itself into thinking it's this. That it's the mind, that it's the brain, that it's all those things, but all of those things are actually just things found within consciousness. Just like the mirror is found within your eye. So when you have this non-dual awakening, when you realize that consciousness is the divine itself, and that all of these things are simply phenomenon, they're just qualia within consciousness, you realize that your identity, the person that you think you are as an individual, is just smoke and mirrors. It's an illusion. It's a myth that you have decided is true. No, I've never microdosed, Stephen. I've never done any, well, actually, when I was, I don't know, 14 or so, my friend gave me 2 tabs, and they must have been defective because I didn't experience anything. The only thing I can think of is that I'm still tripping balls, and I'm still sitting in the middle of that park, and I don't know it because I'm tripping balls so hard. And I didn't actually live the last 40 years or whatever it was since then. 30 years. I'm still tripping balls, and you're just some kid poking me with a stick right now. No, besides that attempt, which it might have just been a prank, it might have just been a couple pieces of paper, I've never touched anything. Unless you count, like, you know, a little bit of wacky tobacco once in a while, which some people would, but that's been a while too. Now, all of my psychedelic experiences have been through meditative practices instead. And I would argue that they're exactly the same. I have yet to confirm this, but I would argue that they're exactly the same, except one's a little bit more vivid than the other. I would say that the psychedelics are more experientially vivid. That's about all. What's up, Nikki? Necro Nikki is here. What is up, Necro? Watch out, Necro Nikki, because Wyatt, I don't know. I'll let him tell you. Anyway, Sushi, I didn't really answer your question, though. And I apologize for that. It's just that the question, to answer that question requires clarity on what spirits and beings are. When you understand from the non-dual perspective what you are, you realize that spirits are no different. I'm going to name 3 different things, and I'm going to tell you right up front that they're exactly the same. They're the same kind of thing. You, Spider-Man, and Zeus. There's no difference between the 3 of you. You're all the same thing. You're all equally real and unreal. You're all fictional characters. You're all alive. You all have a story that evolves. You're all can be discovered in history, and you all influence the world, at least from the perspective of mortality. From the perspective of mortality, Spider-Man's more real than you are. Spider-Man has had more of an influence on the world than you probably ever will have, unless you're like more rich and powerful than you sound. Maybe you are somebody important, but I'm saying the average person, Spider-Man's more meaningful than them. Spider-Man, a cartoon character, a comic book character, is more real than you are as far as the history books will show. Isn't that interesting? And there is no functional difference between the person you think you are and Spider-Man. You're both stories that were made up, and it was made up collectively by all the people who experienced it. Your first moments in this world that you can remember, everything that you know about yourself is something someone else began to tell you, and then you took for yourself, like an egregore, if you know what an egregore is. An egregore is an imaginary friend that a group of people or an individual makes real magically by treating them real until the story sort of takes on a life of its own beyond the scope of the people who created it. It's sort of like set free in the collective conscious, and that's where it lives. So an egregore is a very special kind of entity. Well, that's what you are, my friend. See, you're a blob of meat. No, you're not. You're not a blob of meat, by the way. But from a materialistic perspective, you're a blob of meat that someone has given a name and a story to go along with it. But you're not the story, you're not the name. Just like the ship of Theseus isn't the legend of the ship of Theseus, it's a bunch of wood. All of the things that you use to identify yourself are a form of denial. Everything you assert about who you are is a denial of something you're not. If I say I'm D.H. Thorne, what I'm really saying is I'm not the rest of this universe, which is patently absurd because everything that goes into D.H. Thorne existing requires the rest of the universe to exist and flows in and out of me. All of the air that I'm breathing in and out, that's part of me. Doesn't that mean that the whole atmosphere of the planet is my lungs? Isn't that what that actually means? If you think about it, it's not an abstraction. It's actually kind of what it means. Any really good biologist knows you can't separate the organism from its environment. One could argue that they go together as the same entity. It's a symbiotic organism. And really, the only reason that we don't call them all one thing is because we've been trained by Western material thinking to separate everything with ideas and words. So these spirits, these entities that you're talking about, they are living in the same way that you are living. So they're living like you're living, meaning they have a life, they have a story, they have a history, and they grow and they change and they develop. But that's all they are, is stories. You're just a story that you're taking too seriously. And I don't mean that you are too, I'm saying the person you think you are. That person is a story that you're taking too seriously. You're actually the same divinity that I am. We're both the same ultimate non-dual divinity, just looking at ourselves from different perspectives. It's one self. Just like you see out of two eyes. But it comes together as one vision. We're two people having separate experiences, but it's actually going to one divine being. Just as one eye is ignorant of what the other eye sees, but ultimately it's all seen by the same thing. And you might say, well, I don't remember that. How come I don't know what you're seeing right now, Thorne? Because you don't remember. You're currently, the divine is focused on you right now. And it is focused on me right now. And because time's an illusion, it can look like it's happening at the same time, but there is, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So do these entities influence the world? If I were to limit the explanation to where I just left it, then yes, you could say that they do. If you believe that the world is influenceable, then yes, they do. However, my understanding is a little different. My understanding is rooted in a combination of this non-dual philosophy that's not just a philosophy. I didn't just come to this conclusion. Non-dualism is an experiential revelation. It's not an argument. I can't convince you non-duality is true. All I can do is point you into having a non-dual experience, and then if you have that, then we will share the same perspective, which we will then try to discuss and come to terms with, come to grips with, and explain to people. But between the non-dual, there is also things like the many worlds interpretation of the quantum problem. If you accept the many worlds interpretation, any version of it, and you also realize that time is not what we experience it as. Time is, to say it's an illusion is unfair, but the idea that time flows is an illusion. Time is better considered to be a coordinate system. Just like up, down, left, and right. If we treat time as just another coordinate, things start to make even more sense. So if we have a many worlds interpretation of the multiverse, of quantum uncertainty, we can assume that every possible thing does happen. We only experience one version of it, but all of those things exist out there somewhere in the multiverse. We only experience one of them. So this means that this idea that one moment causes the next, that is a myth. That's a fallacy. It's rooted in what we see and experience, but if the idea of a multiverse is true, and time is better thought of as a coordinate system, then that implies that every possible event that has happened, is happening, or will happen exists simultaneously. We just don't see it because consciousness isn't there right now. What if I told you that you don't move, consciousness moves? And when I say consciousness moves, I mean its attention moves. The attention of consciousness is what moves. Like when your eye scans a page, the words don't move on a piece of paper. Your eye changes what it's looking at. Your eyes change perspective. That causes you to see different words in sequence. That sequence creates a linearity, and that linearity causes your mind to fill with the thoughts and feelings and visions and words of the paper. So do spirits influence the world? No, not under that understanding. Spirits are an illusion and a manifestation of that. Spirits are a manifestation caused by the shifting of attention through the timelines of the multiverse. And it's a story, just like you're a story. Joxer, I think what you're trying to say, attention of consciousness on the body, I think what you're trying to say is what I'm getting at, is that your sense of self is just the attention of divine consciousness on this limited little thing that you call a body in a very specific position of place and time. Because this body doesn't exist. When I say this body, that instant when I said that, that body ceases to exist the moment after I say it. Because the blood is pumping, so the body is now different. The atoms and molecules are wiggling because of heat energy. That body ceases to exist the moment I'm aware of it. Everything I'm aware of exists in the past. The mind is behind the curve of reality. That sound happened long before you heard it. Your body ceased to exist the moment you identify it. So attention of consciousness is on the body and comes aware of it and realizes it gradually. Consciousness is what's moving. It's not generated by the body. The body is generated in consciousness as a vision. One of the big things, one of the reasons that people, even people who are familiar with non-duality, get so attached to the idea of there being individual spirits in a theistic way even, is because so long as that's possible, it's possible that you're real. And that's desperately what the ego wants. The ego is like a donut. I heard somebody say this today, I don't remember where. The ego is like a donut. It's got a hole in the middle that can never be filled. The ego is a border. It's a form, but it's void. It says, I am this, but that's not what it is. Ajna says, so within duality, it still makes sense to talk to a spirit as much or as little sense as it makes to talk to. Yes, exactly. But someone who is living in an ascended state knows that it's just a game. Give somebody a heroic dose of psychedelics and they will tell you, I forget who the guy's name was, but one of the people who was big in the psychedelics movie in the 60s will tell you that it's like, it's just a bunch of superficial bullshit. It's a joke. All of these little pleasantries that we do when we talk to each other. Say, hi, Necro Nikki. You know what I'm doing? 2 sock puppets. Hello, Necro Nikki. Hi, D.H. Thorne. It's preposterous. But we do it anyway. And it's a lot of fun. Necro Nikki says that's why I get jelly-filled donuts. Oh, sister, you're funny as shit. It's one of my favorites too, by the way. Jelly-filled donuts, definitely. I can't eat those anymore. I'm trying to, I went off keto a little bit. I was eating that keto bread and it has very, very low carbs, so I can have some of it. But I started eating it as much as I ate bread before, and it was like, I think I put like almost 15 pounds back on. So I gotta go like strict, just meat and cheese and oil and no freaking breads or anything again. Damn, you had to say jelly donut right now, didn't you? I want a jelly donut. Nice. She's got good taste, I guess. Is that a new one or a used one?
Used.
Nice. I don't know how she got that. I'll let you guys figure out what we're talking about. Oh, dog. Very nice. Very nice. Jockster says, I used to watch a Christian show called The Donut Man, and the idea being that God was the only thing that could fill our donuts. Every major religion is rooted in the same monist. When I say monist, I don't mean like monks. I mean monist as a philosophy, monist as a metaphysical philosophy. They're all rooted in the same monism that's been corrupted and perverted to create a religion that would cause people to serve and slave. That statement by that Christian is technically and fundamentally correct. It's just that the silly Christian 9 out of 10 times thinks that God is a separate entity from the self. And this is why they're fallen. If you are fallen, it's not because you sinned, it's because you forgot who you are. That's why you're fallen. And by fallen, I mean you've fallen asleep. You're dreaming. You're God dreaming that you're you. And when you realize that that's not what you are, it's a lucid dream. You wake up. Doesn't mean the dream's over. A lucid dream doesn't mean you stop dreaming. It just means that you realize you're dreaming. Someone who has achieved gnosis, samadhi, the true version of it, wakes up like a lucid dream. The dream doesn't die, doesn't end. You're still here. You're still aware of everything like you are now. But your perception has changed fundamentally in a way that cannot be described except through analogy. Sushi says, funny thing is when you said the ego is like donuts, I was drawing donuts. Dude, that's hysterical. Nice. Asha said, I've had heroic doses where ego dissolves and heroic doses where it didn't. And then you can interface with entities beyond conscious understanding. But that too is part of the self. Exactly. Imagine that you're an infinite piece of black marble with golden, gold with a golden pattern in it. It's all the same marble, but the patterns, they're distinct from the darkness. It's still the same marble, but some of the marble looks a little different. And you can see within that marble patterns that you recognize as things. That symbolic representation is not the reality. The symbols are the superficial thing that point to something else that's invisible. So I would argue that those entities that you encountered in that psychedelic space were symbolic. Just like you're symbolic. Just like I'm symbolic. We're all symbolic of an essence that is unspeakable. This is why I like warping Lovecraftian horror, because I think Lovecraft might have knew something. Because when Lovecraft, it was something of the non-dual spiritual spectrum, because it's like he knew or just synchronistically said all the same shit, just from a darker way of looking, just from like a scary point of view. From the perspective of ego, the idea that ego is an illusion is a cosmic horror. The idea that all is one is the idea of Azathoth dreaming of immortal reality, and that if Azathoth ever wakes up, that reality goes away. That is literally like Vedic shit right there. That's literally, reality is a dream of God, and that if God wakes up, it's over. He basically regurgitated Vedic lore. Fucking fascinating shit. That's why I like Lovecraft stuff. But most people don't want to hear that. They want to hear about how it's just scary monsters. So. Yes, Ajna, exactly. Intellectual understanding of non-duality is not the same as knowledge, experience. That's precisely right. This is why I'm convinced that the early Gnostics were a result of Advaitin or some other mystic from India or related, Buddhism, etc., that encountered people in Egypt, taught them transcendental techniques. They had a moment of samadhi. This became the word gnosis. Samadhi and gnosis are virtually, I guess there's subtle differences, but to me, they're interchangeable. They're the same word. Just like chaos and void are the same word. I think, people will disagree and say, well, I don't use it that way. That's fine. I think the correct usage of the word Gnostic or gnosis is equal to samadhi. I think it's supposed to be the same. Chaos is synonymous with Brahman. Soul is Atman. Or spirit. Depends on how you look at things, I suppose. We have avidya and agnosis, almost the same word. The Platonic and Neoplatonic Greeks, Pythagoras, all those people, the Gnostics, they were all influenced and also influencing, I believe, Hindu and Buddhist culture. I think that that's pretty much, it may not be validated through archaeological evidence, but when we consider the resonance between what they're talking about and then realize that there was cultural exchange at the time, in my mind, it's pretty obvious that they influenced each other a lot. The Hindu word chakra is kakra, which is a Greek word, which means wheel, which is roughly how it's interpreted. It's a pinwheel, it's a wheel, it's a spinning vortex, it's a, there was a lot of exchange going on, a lot. There were Buddhists in ancient Egypt, dude. Well, maybe not ancient Egypt, but in not ancient Egypt, but what we would consider ancient. But during the period when the Greeks and the Egyptians were kind of partying together, there was Buddhists there. There was Buddhists in the Library of Alexandria. There was Buddhists at the time of Jesus in the Sea of Galilee. Maybe not in the Sea of Galilee, but definitely in that region. I'm convinced that if Jesus existed, he traveled to India. I'm convinced of that. Yes, old Persian culture clearly inherited stuff from Vedic era. Yes. And all of these things go back to the ancient Proto-Indo-European cultures. Nobody knows when the first non-dualist existed, because it's pretty arguably likely that the first people to have a non-dual experience were probably cave people. If you look at the cave paintings throughout the world, but in Europe in specific, and you see that they treated this as like a spiritual place, a womb in Mother Earth, you have to realize that what they practiced, they probably would go into those caves. They'd probably take some kind of psychedelic mushroom or some shit, go into those caves, trip balls, see God, and that was the source of their savage spirituality, whatever that was. Fast forward several thousand years, however many, 10, 20, 30,000 years, however long it was. There's probably ancient civilizations before Sumer, but let's pretend that recorded history as we know it's accurate and there was no Atlantis or anything like it. So let's pretend that 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 100,000 years ago, cave people were tripping balls in caves and they were seeing God and they were having these non-dual experiences, these Gnostic experiences, probably. Not sophisticated in the way we understand them, but in a way that they understood. They recognized the union of all things. This carried forward throughout time and history. And then we get to the mystery schools of Greece, which of course were inspired by older mystery schools going back to antiquity. These mystery schools, one of the things that happened, especially in the Eleusinian mysteries, of course we have to sort of reconstruct it based on assumptions, but they would go into an underground cave. They drink the kykeon that was laced probably with psychedelic fungus growing in the wheat that made up the drink, and they'd probably trip balls, and they would probably conduct a ceremony that was a bunch of dramatic stage play. That's where thespians come from, that would reenact the story of Persephone and Demeter and all that shit, which was the death and rebirth of the individual, the death of their ego and the rebirth of the ego. So they would achieve this ego death. They'd come back and they would realize that they weren't that person they thought. At the very least, they knew that the person they believed themselves to be was an illusion. At the very least, they might not realize that they were God, but at the very least, they realized that the person they thought they were was a delusion. That alone is a powerful achievement and changes them forever. And that wasn't unique to them. That we look at that Eleusinian mystery shit and go, wow, that's really unique. No, that's the norm. Every spiritual culture has some version of that, whether it's psychedelics or transcendental meditation or beating a drum until you fucking lose your mind, with all these different primitive cultures doing this. And you have the Sikhs, and you have the ecstasy, the dancing, the whirling dervishes. There's all these different practices that lead to the same tuning out of the ego, and you have ego death and you're just pure consciousness. So there's nothing I can prove, but to me it's clear that humanity has known the truth in some form. Perhaps as early as far back as humanity was first able to talk. Probably further. One could even argue that the animals around us know that truth, just not in a cerebral way like we're trying to talk about it. You know how I know that? Because I know that when my cerebral thinking is off, what's the difference between my mind and the mind of my dog? Sure, I might be able to act in a more intelligent way, but my experience of reality is getting similar when my subvocal thinking is shut down, when I'm just experiencing reality. I've tuned out one more distraction. I don't think my dog thinks in words, do you? Probably not. I'm not even sure my dog thinks with pictures. My dog is just aware of desires and intentions and just acts on them. That's kind of like how I am when I'm not in an egoistic, habitual thinking kind of way. Correct, Ajna. So it's always the apocalypse. Yes, correct. It is. Every moment is the revelation of the divine will. And you are the divine, and it is your will. All of it. I'm listening to music too, by the way. That's why I seem like a little distant. I'm listening to like really mellow. What is this one? Time Stop Chill Step on Bloom. That's a pretty good mix. It's kind of like whimsical, I suppose. Not whimsical, just chill. It's very chill. Well, anyway, we're at 1 hour. Oh, commercials, get out of here. You know, like, I can't stand when you have like a relaxing mix on YouTube and they drop commercials in the middle of it. Like, go away, man. Like, nobody likes you. You're not as popular as you think you are, bro. I hate when, do you guys ever listen to like, you know, wind sounds for 12 hours? You ever listen to that and they have commercials like right in the middle of it? Oh, man, that's frustrating. Atropa says, yeah, and they blast the magic. They do. They like raise the volume. It's like, la 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 la. Your soap is bad. You know, it's like a really big dubstep bass drop, but it's on extra. No, thank you. Wyatt says, DH Thorne, I listen to music on streams more often. Whenever you blab on mindlessly, you become more wise for some reason. The same happens to me. I know what you mean, dude, because there's something about, I feel like I'm giving a motivational speech if the music's just right. I think that's what it is. Like my own mood starts getting in tune with the music. What's up, Joffrey again? I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing all right. Actually, someone asked me today how I was doing. Jacquas. I love Jackass. If you're watching Jackass, you're a cool dude. He messages me just to say, hey, man, you okay? You doing all right? I don't know what prompted that. I'm not used to that. I don't like it, but I do. I'm like, it makes me feel funny. Don't make me talk about how I feel. I'm a toxic male. We don't talk about how we feel. No, it's one of those things I don't think about very often. How do I feel? I'm generally pretty detached from myself in a way. So I would say that most of the time I'm pretty mellow and laid back and zen and kind of stoic. And by stoic, I mean I'm not tremendously moved most of the time. I'm always just kind of okay because I don't usually experience any extreme for very long. I'm not usually very sad for long or very happy or very angry for long. It's like emotions are something I have for a short period and then I just go back to a kind of peaceful state. Like I'm just kind of at peace with everything. I'm not usually upset for long. In fact, when I do get upset for long, it really bothers me because it's unusual for me. I mean, you can ask my wife. I tend to like snap back pretty quickly. There's that song by Psy, Elastic Heart. Reminds me of me a lot sometimes. Did I just... Sia, is that how you say it? My wife said Sia. Sia. Not Psy. See, that just shows my ex-boomer. Boomer X. I'm an ex-boomer. Here's the rant topic: higher dimensional geometry and whether or not it could exist. Of course it could exist. I would argue it probably does. I think that at the very least we have a four-dimensional situation right now. We only see it as three because we're ignorant of how time is a dimension. string theory postulates that there are, well, it depends on which version of string theory, but sometimes between 9, 11, 21 other dimensions, so total, including the 3 or 4 that we have now that we understand, and that those dimensions are looped in on themselves. So they're tiny, and we don't see them, but they're there. And that theoretically the Big Bang is actually just one of those loops, or 4 of those loops expanding to the size that they are now. It's pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. And yeah, I use all the ad block stuff, but I'm using my phone to listen because it's more convenient with my headphones to use a phone. I could do it with my computer, but I notice whenever I use Bluetooth speakers on my computer, it always causes bugs. Because when it switches on and off, it doesn't know which one to switch to, and it causes all kinds of chaos. So I just do that with my phone. It's like my phone's better at it. Yeah, exactly, Wyatt. The 3D universe that we see could just be the shadow of a 4D or 5D object. I would argue it actually probably is. It probably is, on some level. But that's if we're looking at it from a purely materialistic position. One of the problems that we have to be careful of is that modern science has actually become more about mathematics, and I don't mean the intuitive essence of mathematics. It's about the symbols of math. It's more about the notation than it is about the essence behind it. It's like I tried in this one stream to explain the difference between thinking that 2 + 2 causes 4 and realizing that 2 + 2 points to 4, and that 4 points to 4-ness, not the actual number. The number 4 is just notation for the essence of 4. The essence of 4-ness is without notation. It's an essence. It's there, implied by the 2 + 2. And the 2 + 2 is implied by the 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. This is why you have the Fibonacci sequence, the 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, and so on. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 5, 8, 12, 13. The essence of the Fibonacci sequence is also the origin of Neoplatonic, the monad, all that kind of shit. Because you have this idea that there is a oneness, there is a monad, that they use the word emanate, but a better word might be implosion, or subdivision, or obstruction, or denial, or ignorance, which causes the illusion of another one. So you get 1, 1, and then 2, because you're supposed to add each number that came before it. And to the Pythagoreans, you're not really talking about an object till you're talking about 3. So the first actual 1 was actually 3 to them, if that makes sense. So I'm not much into mathematics. I have a very logical brain, a very mathematical brain, but not a notationally mathematical brain. If you ask me to do long division or some shit, I can't do it as well as other people because I get caught up in the notation. I can't do the notation. But the logic, like somebody used to say, they haven't been in here in a while, they used to say I was really good at a priori knowledge, meaning I'm really good at being able to put together ideas in a way that leads me to being able to know something I shouldn't be able to know. Sort of like, it's sort of an a priori knowledge if I take an object and drop it to know that it will hit the floor, right? I can ascertain that it's going to hit the floor. I don't have to see it hit the floor to know that it's going to hit the floor because I know the relationship between the different things that are happening. So I'm really good at logic and mathematics in that sense, but I'm terrible at the notational math. I'm terrible at algebra. I'm terrible at all that shit. but I get the logic behind it. It's more like, I mean, I don't think I have like literal dyslexia for numbers, but I'm terrible with, I can't hold numbers in my head long enough. I can't, like, to do math, like I screw up, I get like impatient. I think it's ADHD, I think is what it really is. I think if I were to go to a qualified doctor, they'd be like, oh, the reason why you're not that very good at doing mathematics, the notation, is probably because you're ADHD. That's probably why. But philosophical logic and things like that, they hold my attention because they're a pleasure. I mean, when I am in my most natural state, I'm not stressed about anything. Or if I am, it's like a physical stress, like when I'm at work. Like if I'm at work and I'm pulling a cart with a fucking tree ball in it and I'm struggling, my consciousness shifts its attention away from the struggle to intriguing ideas. And I philosophize while I'm pulling a ball cart. And my natural state is to constantly be sometimes subvocally, in other words, I'm talking to myself, or just in a state of awareness without words, pictures, or thoughts, I'm reasoning through something. I know it's hard to explain because without thoughts and words, how can you reason? You can, trust me. You don't need to think about something to decide something. Thoughts are not related to decisions at all. You may think they are, but they're not. So I don't know, my natural state is to always be thinking about those things in that way, to be reasoning even without thinking. And maybe that's why I'm decent at this, because to me it's a pleasure. It's like, it gives me warm and fuzzies to contemplate all of these things. Galaxies, time, dimension, multiverse. It's just pleasure. Like I'd rather be doing that than most other things, most of the time. I don't get bored of it, not easily. I may get bored of talking about it, but I don't get bored of it. So anyway, we got about 10 more minutes left, so I am going to be I'm going to be cutting loose in a minute. So I want to remind you guys, I no longer do the teaching class. As I said in the beginning of the stream, I've sort of decided to take an indefinite hiatus from doing things like teaching classes, mentorship, even doing rituals and shit. I've decided I'm stepping away from all of that to focus only on contemplating current events, writing my book, which will probably never get finished now at this point for a while. I'm saying that just to kind of jinx myself, so it goes the opposite. So I really need to get something published again. It's been too long. It's like I'm getting a fucking complex from not finishing it. I've decided to take a step back from doing those professional services. I think I need to just stay that way for a while. So if you want to support my work, you can really help me out by going to the Linktree link in the description and follow the various links to either purchase a product, or if you're interested in those classes that I did, they are all now available for $9 a month. You can watch them all on repeat. There's over 60, 70 hours worth of classroom instruction. Some of them are really, really good. Like some of them I will watch occasionally and just go, damn, that was a good class. Like I could see people learning. I could see like that one really was really useful for people. Like the one on the psi balls or chi balls, that one, if you've never made a real psi ball and felt it, like if you ever do, it's like, that's possible? Like what the fuck? Like how come science isn't talking about this? Like what is this? It's so trippy. Whether it's actually something or just some psychosomatic illusion, doesn't matter. You can feel it. It's pretty wild when you do. So if you want to support my work, that's one way you can do it. It's very affordable, and you can watch unlimited for very, very low price, because you get the link to the playlist. You know, you can watch it as much as you want. So if you want to support my work, it's a cheap way you can do it. Or you can go buy a book, or you can buy a product off of Etsy. My wife's stuff is still there. She's got a bunch of new stuff that we haven't advertised because we've just been lazy about it. We're kind of sick of, I don't know, I don't want to say grifting, but you know, we're kind of sick of advertising our stuff. We're kind of sick of playing that game, you know. Not that we won't do it again. It's just like we need a break from it. Like I'm tired of like, hey, have you bought our crap lately? You know. But at the same time, I only work part-time at my other job because I'm not equipped to be doing 7 days a week right now. I'm just not. So I'd rather do 3 days, 4 days of that, and then 3 or 4 days of this. That's how I look at it. You know, I'd rather split the difference and do both. So if you want to support my work, that's one way you can do it. If you don't want to support my work that way, but you still want to help me out, like, share, and subscribe, make sure that people see this video, that also helps. That's always awesome. Especially if you're broke and you can't afford anything else. So. Yeah. All right. So I'll give you guys one more reasonable question. It could be current events, could be magic, could be whatever. Whatever you want it to be about. So what's on your mind? First good comment. Otherwise, I'll be cutting this in 5 more minutes. So I do appreciate everybody who came in tonight. Thanks again to everybody. If I didn't acknowledge you, I apologize. But some of you guys are awesome as always. Some of you guys have some great questions. Some of you guys have some ridiculous questions. And I love them all. You know, I like my Thursday night crew. You guys are always cool. I'm going to try to do like a weekday video or a weekday stream sometime next week, probably. Maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. So keep your eyes open for that if you're available during the day. I do enjoy doing those. Really depends. Like I like doing the daytime streams. Those tend to be a little bit more current events oriented, although this one was very current event. The first hour was almost all current events, wasn't it? But look, we're going through shit, guys. This is a spiritual war going on. It's an information psycho-spiritual war. To ignore it, you know, that's better for entertainment. That's great, but come on, you got to be thinking about this. You got to be wondering. You got to have thoughts and opinions, right? We've got to communicate on this shit because this is historic time, man. If the things that I see going on behind the scenes in my sorcerer's site are accurate, the next 5 or 10 years is going to decide the next 500 to 1,000 in a way that you can't even imagine. Prince of Geigel asks, what is your opinion on the oracles? I don't have one. Don't know for sure. Don't have one. I'll have to look that up, actually, for specific. Oh, Ajna, why'd you have to ask me a big one like that? Alexis 23, I wrote a book on it, actually. So it'd probably be easier just to direct you at the book, but vampirism, all vampirism is rooted in psi-vampirism, even sanguinarian vampirism. It's all about energy. And a lot of that energy is psychosomatic, we'll say, emotional. So, but I have a book on that. It's dedicated to Lilith too, so it's pretty good. But no, Ashna, that's like a beginning of the night question. Where do people go when they die? The answer to that question is very simple. Where does a wave go when it hits the shore? That's the answer to the question of where do people go when they die. What happens to a wave when it hits the shore? By the way, waves don't exist, just so you know. There's no such thing as a wave. A wave is an activity. It's not a thing. In the same way, the person you think you are is an activity. It's not a thing. Sushi says, once I make it big, I'll be sure to give you a very generous tip. Always enjoy it. Hey, you know what a dream come true would be? Someday to just find some very rich Elon Musk benefactor that wants to buy me a freaking mansion somewhere and just have me on tap for spiritual conversations. That would be pretty badass. I could probably live with that. At least for a while anyway. Yeah, you know, it's funny you're saying Spirit Mercenaries I raid. I've been like really into freaking tomahawks and axes again lately. I had to like buy some new ones to try to decorate and start using for some bushcrafty stuff. It's spring, so I always get into like, let's go outside and chop some wood and do some martial arts and shit. And then I get bored and I don't do it. But, you know, I satisfy the itch because that ADHD thing. Well, the egregores, just like the wave in the ocean. I mean, the egregore, an egregore can die too. An egregore can crash on the shore too. The egregore tends to outlive the body because so long as people remember it, talk about it, and treat it like it's alive, there's access to it. And the Greeks actually knew a lot about this because when you look at how they treated gods and how gods could be killed, it's literally exactly the same thing as what would kill an egregore. So they can be forgotten and they fade, or they can be broken apart and thus cease to be. It's no different for an egregore. When you die, everybody who knew you will have a collective story about you, and it's mostly going to agree, but on a long enough timeline, that story is going to split apart, and you're going to have all those different people telling different stories about you, and each one of them is true to the point where you, the essence of your egregore, splits up and is divided up and lost in Tartarus. It's forgotten, right? The original essence of you is forgotten, and it's replaced by all these different incarnations of you. It's like splitting a log into a bunch of different pieces. The log's still kind of there, but it's not a log anymore. And egregores do the same thing. But yes, back to the sea. It was never anything but the sea. A wave doesn't exist. A wave is the sea. A wave is something that the sea is doing. Right? There is no wave. Waves don't exist. They're an activity of the ocean. Nothing. That's why it's such a great answer and such a great question. I've often, you know, when I first came up with that, it was sort of like a short little story that I made up where I envisioned like this young boy with an old master, and the young boy was sort of sad because his old master was going to die, and they were sitting and meditating on the beach, and the young boy asked the old master, because the old master seemed a little infirm, he says, "Master, what happens to us when we die?" And the master sat for a moment and then looked at the kid and said, same thing that happens to the oceans when they hit the shore. The same thing happens to the waves when they hit the shore. And of course it stems from that whole be the ocean, not the wave. Anyway, guys, this will be it for this one. Maybe next week we'll talk about that where do you go after your death. So we'll see. We'll see. You know, I can even say right now, you just died already. You died a moment ago and you're here now. So every moment is a kind of death. What's the difference? It's just one more dramatic change than another. That's all. Consciousness is timeless. You don't go anywhere. Anyway, guys, I'll check you next week. Until then, mind the shadows.